evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
Welcome to Mahoning Drive-In Radio. I'm Mark, and I'm here this week with, you know him, you love him, he's in the documentary, it's Rob.
Hi, Mark.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. So we're recording this in the off season, and the idea behind this little series of podcasts is to give the customer who may know us from the drive-in, get to know the person behind, it's the person behind the mask this last season, but a little bit more about who we are just beyond what they see on the lot. So I just have a few questions, and we will chat amicably as we normally would at the drive-in anyway. So how did you first discover the Mahoning Drive-In Theater? What was the spark that lit the flame in your passion for this place?
Well, I think that the first time I heard about the drive-in was in 2013. A good friend of mine was talking about coming up to see what was probably one of the first incarnations of Bite Night, Jaws in Jurassic Park. Sadly, I never went to the drive-in myself until 2016. I heard about it on Facebook shortly before season opening, and the rest is history. Now,
correct me if I'm wrong, the documentary that Al Manelli's At the Drive-In documentary, available now on better streaming services and DVD. Did he capture your first visit to the Mahoning in that film?
I don't believe so. I can't recall the first time that I met him, and I'm fairly confident it was not opening weekend. So that first initial explosion of euphoria, that's just relegated to the time and place, unfortunately, or fortunately.
So how long was it between when you first attended a Mahoning show and you becoming a regular at the Mahoning?
I would say about 12 hours, just based on the fact that I was there opening night and then came back the following night for the same two movies.
I was the same way. I went to a show. I went to the first retro horror show they did, which was the last show of the season one year. And then I was just there just about every week after that. It was such a unique place and experience. And it was just week after week of old movies on the big screen, and with exhumed sort of deep dish old movies on the big screen. And I couldn't get enough.
Yeah, there's really nothing quite like that first season when you become so entranced with it as you and I are. I remember seeing almost everything with the exception of a handful that unfortunately I fell asleep during. And yeah, Exhumed is really good at coming at you with the deep cuts.
So how did you come to work at the Mahoning? What was the story of you going, like many of us, from patron to employee?
Well, a lot of it was at the urging of Al himself. He saw it as the logical end of my character arc, as you may recall, since you were there. And it was definitely likely to happen in the long run regardless, but I think that it was accelerated by his presence. And I can't say I'm not happy about that. I'm very grateful for that and where it's gotten me. I guess that answers the gist of it, although it's worth mentioning that I left and then came back again because I just couldn't stay away.
And you began as a volunteer, as we all were. Now, and you was sort of like working behind the stand in the snack bar. I was jokingly refer to you as the soda czar because if anybody has something really cool to drink that we sell at the Mahoning, you can thank Rob for that, because it's like you comb the wilds of Pennsylvania to find these exclusive and interesting flavors for people to have. And so often when the snack bar is open normally and people can just like look in the coolers and see what we have, they would exclaim about the cool versions of, popular drinks, that interesting Mountain Dew variant or Yoo-hoo or whatever. And on behalf of the public at large, I'd like to thank you for that.
I appreciate that, even as I'm doing my best to cut out added sugars in my own diet. I'm hoping that Jeff is amicable to the idea of some flavored water in the near future. And
I've always thought the variety of what we have is one of our strengths. On any given weekend, I would say, aside from the movie theaters that have those soda machines that create 100 varieties by mixing and matching flavors, I think we have, on average, more than any normal movie theater would have as far as flavor variety.
You're right. I think that you're definitely right. And it's worth mentioning that those freestyle soda machines are one of the things I miss the most.
What was your experience with drive-ins growing up? Had you gone to drive-ins as a youth? Were there multiple places you visited? Was that something that you had all your life, or did you come to drive-ins later in life?
I remember the first movie I saw at a drive-in that I remember at least was Dick Tracy. My dad took me, I think, and unfortunately, I remember very little about it aside from that. After that, I don't remember many specifics, but I do remember going semi-frequently. I was very lucky to grow up near both Shankweiler's Drive-In and Becky's Drive-In. And unfortunately, I wasn't aware of the Mahoning Drive-In's existence for such a long time. Otherwise, I would have surely been there regularly as well. And then there was really, unfortunately, a spell of about 10 years where I didn't go to any drive-ins at all. I think it was a double feature of Dinosaur and Mission Impossible 2, and then nothing until 2010, 2011. I don't remember exactly what prompted it. I think it was after I moved back to Pennsylvania from a brief stint in New York City. And as you probably know, drive-ins until recently were pretty much a not existent thing in New York City. And even now, living in New York City with a car is hard enough, so most people there can't go to the drive-ins, and quite a few of them come to ours, which I am very proud of.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how far and wide people come. People make it a destination. They build vacations around it. Some people build, milestone anniversaries around coming to see us. But it's heartening to see how many people will drive a good distance regularly to come. I mean, we have regulars from the city in New Jersey and farther away than that. Which I think speaks to the programming and the staff and the atmosphere that we've all sort of cultivated over the last few seasons.
Definitely. And coming from you, that is game recognizing game.
So yeah, I used to drive from New Hampshire every weekend. Life has changed, and I'm driving, basically from New York City every weekend, which is 4 hours less. But it makes it easier for me to come down and back on the same night, which is kind of cool for our weeknight shows. So currently, or we're about to go into the 2021 season as we record this, and you are taking on a new role at the drive-in, one totally unrelated to what you've done there before, but I believe it's one related to something you've done in the past, right?
Correct. I previously worked as a projectionist at the Civic Theater in Allentown, also known as the 19th Street Theater. And that was unfortunately not very long. I believe that it was really only about 6 or 8 months that I was working as a 35 millimeter projectionist, both reel-to-reel and platter. And it was very satisfying. It was a lot of fun. It was, until my current full-time occupation, probably the best job I ever had. And this despite also being a job I was not very well trained on. I did it as best as I could. I may have told you, Mark, about the story involving a brain wrap that I had to fix, not knowing that I was doing it correctly. As it turns out, I was doing it correctly. I just figured it out as I go, and it took about 8 hours to fix what the people before me messed up so badly.
Why don't you tell anybody who's listening who doesn't know what a brain wrap is?
That's a good idea. A brain wrap, these are layman's terms probably. A brain wrap involves a platter system, which is when all of the film reels are spliced together so that essentially when the movie starts, you push a button and it just plays the whole film without any further supervision. But this also requires a series of safety mechanisms designed to maintain the proper tension levels with the film so that it moves properly and it doesn't get caught up anywhere. In this case, the projectionist scheduled that day did not show up. Someone who didn't know what they were doing tried to get it going, and they brought me in at the last minute to try and fix it. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that some important switches had been flipped. And I was able to save the film, but not the film screening, because the film was winding very tightly around the central portion of the platter. That's called the brain. That's where all the really expensive technology that makes everything work is. And I am really loath to think about how close we were to destroying not just the film print, but the projection equipment itself. And essentially, to fix the brain wrap, you need to rewind the film by hand. And I'm very grateful that it was a movie that was about an hour and a half.
Not
about as short as possible.
So this season, you'll be assistant projectionist, correct, at the Mahoning?
Yes, I will be under Jeff's tutelage, and I will be learning as much as I possibly can about our reel-to-reel system. I want to be able to do everything that can possibly need to be done, hopefully up to and including changing a bulb, because you know what it's like when something like that happens right before a show.
It's always good to have backups in life for anything, and a job that is as specialized and technical and completely essential as projectionist. It's good to have more than one person who knows how to do that. And beyond that, you'll be touching the film, you'll be handling the film, you'll be handling, in some cases, the same prints that passed through projectors when these films were brand new, which is something about film projection I always value very highly. It may not look as good as it did that first night, but that's the same physical item that gave people enjoyment who knows how many decades earlier.
I'm trying to not be too intimidated by the responsibility, because it's a lot.
So you're a movie fan, you're a film fan, a cinematic aficionado as I am. Can you trace that back? I mean, can you think back to how that started for you, and what were the things that's the sparks that lit that flame in your youth or whenever that was?
Well, I imagine that it started for me in the same way that it started for a lot of my generation and upbringing, which was Disney movies, healthy collection of clamshell titles growing up. And I don't remember it so specifically, but I'm told that my first favorite movies were Alice in Wonderland and The Jungle Book. I'm more aware of taking to Beauty and the Beast and The Brave Little Toaster in the years following. But when it came to a more specific focus on the idea of movies, it was monster movies, essentially. It was a music teacher. I wish I could remember her name right now. She showed the 1925 Phantom of the Opera in a music class in, I want to say, second grade. And that really opened my eyes to a lot of possibilities. And I ended up recording it off of the Sci-Fi Channel shortly thereafter and watching it a lot. And I took to silent movies, I took to early monster movies that eventually segged into more broadly science fiction, Godzilla, and eventually the dam just burst open entirely, and now there's very little that I'm not interested in, from the highest of the high art to the lowest of the trash. I love it all.
So do you have a favorite film or films or genres that you can think of off the top of your head?
Favorite film has been, for the longest time, I would have said 2001. That's still in my top 5, but recently I had to acquiesce to McCabe and Mrs. Miller as my new favorite. Something about that has just continued to deepen. The more I see it, the more life experience I have. Rounding that out, I would say, oh gosh, what did I put at number 2? In the Mood for Love, relatively recent Wong Kar-wai film. And I'd also throw in their Assault on Precinct 13, the original, and Bob Fosse's All That Jazz.
It's funny you say recent or relatively recent. The older you get, the longer ago recent is. Because I'll think about something that was a couple years ago, right? It was 25 years ago. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I still remember when 1985 was 10 years ago, like it's yesterday. And to the rest of your question, favorite film genre, probably horror, but that's definitely not a hard line. I like pretty much any kind of movie as long as it moves me in some way.
That's what I feel too. It just has to be entertaining. or hold my interest or show me something I've never seen before. And it can be the most brilliant film, or it can be something that's fairly silly. So back to drive-ins for a second. This is something that when I was talking with Jeff popped up, and I realized it is sort of a thing for some people. Do you have a specific spot where you park at a drive-in? Like no matter what drive-in you go to, do you have a specific spot you like to get, or does it vary from drive-ins, or is it just totally situational?
It definitely varies based on the drive-in. I try to get as close to the screen as possible without it becoming uncomfortable. Because sometimes you have to, lean in the car a certain way in order to see the whole screen. I like to be able to see the whole screen while just sitting with normal posture. At the Mahoning this past season, I was very determined, and I managed to get a front row spot every single night I was there. And it's generally a little more on the right side of the screen than the left, but I'm pretty open either way. I think that that's a lot to do with trying to block out any unnecessary visual distractions.
That's what it's come to for me. At indoor theaters too. As a kid, I always sat in the back row for whatever reason. And maybe it's because, screens getting smaller and TVs getting bigger. I don't know what, but I like to have the screen fill my field of vision without it being uncomfortable. So I'll go as close as I can at the indoor theater without having to, watch a tennis match. And at most drive-ins, I like to be in the front. And the Mahoning, there's enough distance between the screen and the front row, and the ramps are nice and steep that I don't feel like it's uncomfortable there. I've never sat all the way off to either side, so I'm not sure if that would be awkward or not, but I usually go to the left. I'm probably equidistant from the digital booth to the left as you are to the right. And it's always really comfortable watching it there. I don't feel like I have to slide down in my seat or anything.
It's a real nice pitch, the way that the earth slopes there. And I'm not sure what kind of car you have, but mine is pretty tiny, so I always find I can get a very good angle.
What do you do when you're not at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater in Lehighton, Pennsylvania? What do you do for fun? What do you, in a normal world, not in 2020 and 2021, what do you do when you're not at the drive-in? What do you do vocationally for fun, to relax?
Gosh, it's hard to remember normality, but the things I do in my spare time, I try and stay physically active. I really enjoy where I live. There's a lot of trails, a lot of nice scenery, and it's possible, even now, to go out hiking. Not so much in the winter time. When we're recording it, folks, there's about 18 inches of snow and counting outside. I try to do that very regularly. It may come to surprise you that when I'm not at the drive-in, I often watch movies. And
I wouldn't know a thing about that. That's a foreign lifestyle to me.
It's actually taken quite a bit of determination on my part to even begin to watch some of the TV shows that I've been trying to catch up on. I'm just usually so occupied with catching up on movies, and that's both new movies and old movies. And as far as work goes, my occupation is in the background screening industry. I'm in quality control, which means that I am following various guidelines, making sure that proper procedures are being maintained, and some of the more tedious things like grammar and what have you, which has really helped when it comes to my own writing. As you know, I used to be a film critic, and I retired from that about 6 years ago now, 5 years ago now, because I could tell that I just wasn't enjoying it enough anymore, and it was literally taking away my ability to enjoy movies because it had become such a chore. And I'm very grateful I did, because I've learned a lot more and learned that I needed to learn more in order to do that job correctly. And I look forward to doing it again someday, but more on my terms, more for the enjoyment of it than for the hope of making a living, which has become increasingly difficult, especially since the crash in '08.
Do you have any particularly fond or strong or striking Mahoning memories from the last few seasons that you would like to share with anybody?
When it comes to the Mahoning, there are just far too many great experiences to even begin to be comprehensive. We need a whole season of this podcast to probably go into that. But if I had to pick one, it would be the first John Carpenter festival that Harry and Exhumed Films put on. And I think it was even the last movie of, if not the festival, then it was the last movie of the night. They showed Assault on Precinct 13, and it was a clear night, and you could literally hear the dialogue echoing off of the mountains surrounding the Mahoning Valley, and it still gives me chills thinking about it.
The environment out there lends itself to so many magic moments like that you would not get at an indoor theater or at home, whether it's, lightning striking behind the screen during Bride of Frankenstein or during the John Carpenter weekend. There was a moment, right, my memory of this at least, is right at the beginning of Escape from New York. A helicopter flew from the airport behind the theater, flew over the lot and over the screen. And right as it went over the top of the screen, a helicopter appeared on screen in the film. And it was like entering another dimension. It was insane. It was crazy. So there's so many moments that happen out there on the lot that are just, it's kismet, it just lightning strikes, so to speak.
Truly. And you even jarred another memory loose of mine. Maybe the most unique experience I've had yet at the drive-in, because no night is ever the same, not from person to person, not from, you could show the same movie 5 nights in a row and it would be a different experience. And the first Vamp Party weekend we had, that was the weekend when I believe they showed Vampire's Kiss.
Yes.
And I watched it both nights. And the second night, it was awfully foggy. It was so foggy that the movie couldn't remotely get to the movie screen. That movie existed in the hazy fog, hovering above the lot about 10, 20 feet in the air between the projection room and the screen. And there is really nothing that can remotely compare to seeing that level of Nicolas Cage madness projected as a 3D cone, just moving constantly in the fog. I wish that could somehow be saved and shown elsewhere, because it was one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
And that is where, again, not typically in an indoor theater, a film experience becomes like theater. One of the things people say about the theater is that it only happens, it's a unique experience every time, and you have to be in that spot to experience it that way. And that's the case with the drive-in some nights, with these moments we're talking about. It's a movie. It's the same movie you'll see at home. It's the same movie you'd see anywhere whenever they show it. But you're not going to get that experience unless you were there that night to witness it, unless you were there and awake to witness it. So there are so many moments like that. We can and will fill a podcast talking about these things. So the 2020 season is behind us. It was wonderful. It was our most successful season ever, despite all the craziness going on in the world around us. 2021 proves to be a very interesting season if you've seen any of the shows we have planned. So before we close, I just wanted to ask you if you had any final thoughts for the folks listening, any hopes, dreams, and aspirations for the 2021 season that is soon to be upon us.
Indeed, it's 5 weeks away?
As we're recording, it's very close.
It's very exciting that we're opening early. I'm really excited by the programming that I've seen so far behind the scenes, and I look forward to essentially living there every weekend. I see myself coming up Friday and staying through Sunday, and hopefully it's if it's even half of what I expect it to be, it's going to be well worth the investment. And I, as you know, I moved closer to the drive-in last year in order to attend it more regularly with ease. And this is just the next natural step in my mind.
Well, it's been fun and thrilling for me personally to talk to you and see your face through Zoom, although the people who listen to this won't see that. And we'll be talking a lot more on this podcast as it rolls along and as the season rolls along. Thank you, Rob, so much. And for all of you listening, we will see you at the drive-in.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, Have a very safe trip home. Good night and God bless you.